My name is Isabella. I have been married to my husband, Robert, for 5 years now. We met at a bar. For me, it was a bar I was more or less forced to go to by a colleague from my workplace. I wasn't enthusiastic about it and just sat at the far end drinking my alcohol. It's cheap here, so I have to drink a lot to make it worth it. That's all I was thinking about when Robert approached me and started talking to me. I was forced to come here too. It's my first time at this bar. He said that with a smile. Indeed, Robert was sitting at the far end just like me, drinking his alcohol in silence. Robert and I hit it up immediately. We had many things in common, such as our favorite movies, manga, and games. That day was the start of our regular meetings, and eventually, it led to a relationship. 2 years into our relationship, Robert proposed to me in his apartment where he lived. We got married soon after. After 6 months into our marriage, we were blessed with a child and decided to quit my job and become a stay-at-home mom. To be honest, I only intended to take a short-time maternity and parental leave since I loved my job, but Robert said, "I want you to be a homemaker at this time." So I became a full-time homemaker. I didn't hate doing housework, and during my pregnancy, I was able to spend every day relaxing, feeling our baby growing inside of me. Even after our baby was born, I was happy to witness our child's daily growth up close. Since our child was born, we have been visiting Robert's in-law more often. Robert has a sister who got married before us but didn't have any children yet. His sister and her husband lived near Robert's parents and got along well with them. Whenever we visited Robert's parents, we would always stop by his sister's house. She was very fond of me, and I loved her too. I look forward to visiting her house more than visiting Robert's parents. To be honest, I didn't like going to Robert's parents' house because they always made snide remarks about me. Every time we visited, Robert's mother would say, "Oh, Isabella, did you come too?" It would have been enough for just Robert and Bill to come. Our son's name is Bill. I appreciate that Robert's parents liked our son, but it was tough for me to endure their obvious disdain for me. Robert's mother would say things like, "Isabella, you don't have to come if you don't want to. We're just happy to see Robert and Bill." Robert's father would say things like, "Yeah, and watching you make me sick to my stomach." Robert didn't seem to hear or pretended not to hear their remarks, but when they made snide comments to me, he always acted like he was paying attention to our son instead, even though he rarely took care of our son at home. After several years of such days, one day I received a call from my husband who should have been at work. "Isabella, listen to me. Something serious has happened." Robert spoke in a desperate tone over the phone. I wondered if something really serious had happened to make him so frantic. "What happened? Calm down and tell me." "Oh, right, sorry. I'm just a little out of it. Actually, my mother..." "Huh? What happened to my mother-in-law?" "She fell at home." "So?" I thought it was a trivial matter to call me about. "She sprained her ankle." "It's an emergency," he said, clearly angry. I honestly thought he was making a fuss over nothing. In the past, There was a time when I was unwell and my husband took care of our son by himself. Our son slipped down the stair while my husband wasn't looking and ended up breaking his right ankle. I panicked and suggested taking him to the hospital, but my husband said it was an overreaction. In the end, I took our son to the hospital and everything turned out fine. Compared to that incident, a sprained ankle was nothing. But a sprain doesn't mean there's a fracture, right? If she just rests, it should get better, doesn't it? When I said that, my husband let out a sigh and said, "You're pretty cold, Isabella. I didn't think you're like that." "No, I didn't mean it like that." When I said that, Robert said, "I'm going back to work," and hung up. My husband Robert is very difficult to deal with when he's in a bad mood. He'll hold a grudge for a long time and won't forgive me until I apologize. As expected, Robert's bad mood continued even after he came home. When Robert returned home, I asked him, "Welcome home. I'll warm up your dinner. Do you want to take a bath first?" But he ignored me and went to take a bath in the middle of me warming up the dinner and laying it out on the table. I need to apologize to him, so I decided to apologize to Robert when he got out of the bath. "Hey, Robert, sorry about the phone earlier. I understand that you're worried about your mother." When I said that, Robert looked at me and said, "As long as you understand, it's fine. There's something I wanted to talk to you about, too." "Something you wanted to talk about?" "Yeah, my mother sprained her ankle, right? So she's unable to do the housework for a while, and she's asking us to let her live with us." "Live with us? Until she recovers from her sprain?" "No, indefinitely." Unexpectedly, I let out a loud voice. I quickly covered my mouth, afraid that our son might wake up. "Why suddenly live together?" Trying to regroup, I asked my husband in a hushed voice. "Why not? We're planning to live together eventually. And aren't you worried about Mom?" "Eventually?" I never heard that before. "What? Is Mom a concern for you, Isabella?" If I keep this up, my husband's mood will sour again. I'm worried, but living together permanently is a bit much. As Isabella said that, Robert made a displeased face and said, "If you don't like it, I can take a bill and go to my parents' house." "No, that's not necessary." "There'll be really inconvenience. Being able to stay with my son is the most important thing for me." With that in mind, I reluctantly accepted my husband's proposal to live together. As soon as I agreed, my husband became really happy and started to smile. Looking back now, I should have thought carefully and made a decision. Maybe I was in a rush because I was faced with the ultimate choice of being separated from or living with my son. Once it was decided we are going to live together, my husband immediately started to prepare. "From now on, we'll live with Grandpa and Grandma." He said that while packing with our son. Our son looked happy too. Of course he did. For him, even in-laws like them are good grandparents. I started to think that if my son is happy, that's probably what matters the most. If I just endure, everything will probably turn out fine. But as it turned out, that judgment was still wrong. On moving day, we arrived at my in-laws' house, and they welcomed my husband and son warmly. Of course not me. As for their attitude toward me, it was like this. Isabella is coming along too, huh? Robert and Bill could have come by themselves. Now we have to live with the past. I shuddered at the thought of what's to come. It was clear that both my mother-in-law and father-in-law hated me from the bottom of their hearts. From that day on, I decided to live quietly and avoid making any waves. But reality didn't go so smoothly. When my mother-in-law insisted that she couldn't do the housework because of a sprain, I took over for her. Then Robert's mother said, "Hey, the way you hang laundry is all wrong. Do it again from the beginning," and messed up the laundry I had hung up. Robert's father said, "What's with this coffee? I can't drink something this bad," and even poured the hot coffee I had just served him on me. Although my husband witnessed this, he ignored it completely. The only one who stood up for me was my son. "Don't be mean to my mom," he said. Then my in-laws smiled and said, "No, Bill, you don't understand. Grandma and Grandpa are angry because your mom is doing bad things." It was like they were treating me like the only bad guy. Days like this continued for several months. I finally reached my breaking point and decided to talk to my husband. "Hey, Robert, I've had enough. You see what's going on, right? If you can't help me, let's end this cohabitation," I pleaded with tears in my eyes. However, my husband, "You're being awfully dramatic talking about reaching your limit. Mom and Dad just tried to educate Isabella to be a respectable wife," he said, laughing. "What does it mean to be a respectable wife? I'm doing my best, you know? Yet I'm constantly met with sarcasm and harassment. You're being persistent. Maybe the problem is that you're a failure from the start? Take a step back and cool your head," he said, and went to the bed ahead of me. I began to feel that maybe I couldn't continue with this person anymore. It was a genuine feeling. After a month passed, and my husband still didn't help me in this situation, I seriously considered leaving. However, a turning point came to me 1 week later. It was my day off, but my husband had gone out for a change. When he came back, he was beaming and called me into the room. "Isabella, we are going to move to a new apartment." "Huh? We are moving?" I was surprised by my husband's unexpected announcement. Maybe he had finally decided to let us stop living with his parents because of me? But would his parents allow that to happen? I became anxious and asked my husband, "I'm happy about moving, but do your parents know about this?" Then he smiled and replied, "Of course, we've already talked to them." He said that with a grin on his face. I felt that my husband was unusually calm on that day and had made the decision with my happiness in mind. I accepted his proposal to move right away and started packing the next day as a break from my housework. Once we moved, we would no longer have to deal with my in-laws. I thought that if I kept that in mind, I could endure their sarcastic remarks. On the day before we moved, I happened to witness my mother-in-law packing. I approached her with trepidation and asked, Why are you packing? What are you talking about? We're moving tomorrow, remember?" I was in shock and quickly contacted my husband and asked, "What's going on? What do you mean? Did Mom tell you we were all moving together?" I was devastated. I was thought it was just going to be our family moving, but it turned out my in-laws were coming too. But there was nothing I could do to change the situation, so I reluctantly prepared for the move the next day. The following morning, we were on our way to the new apartment. My husband was excited and said, "We are almost there," but when he arrived, it turned out to be a luxurious new apartment complex in a different location than I had expected. My husband turned to me with a grin and said, "Surprise, Isabella! Did I catch you off guard?" I couldn't help but worry about the high rent. "But the rent here must be expensive, right?" "Don't worry about it for now," he said, cutting me off mid-sentence. He led me to my own room, and I saw that everyone else had their own rooms too. They were all so happy and excited, even though I couldn't believe how we could afford such an expensive place. So I called my husband into my room to ask him about it. "Hey, what's the rent for this house? Is it okay?" "Oh, my dad and mom bought it." He spoke so nonchalantly. "They bought it?" Those in-laws who always begged us for money, claiming they had none? I couldn't believe it. "Where did they get the money? They always say they are broke." "You're lying, right?" When I asked him seriously, my husband just snorted and answered, "They bought it with your money." "Huh? What do you mean?" His unexpected response made my palm sweat. Then my husband spoke cheerfully. "You had savings, didn't you? I borrowed the money and used it." My savings that my husband was talking about was the savings I had desperately accumulated until now for the sake for my son's Bill's future. "I told you I was saving the money for Bill's future. Why did you do something so selfish?" When I said this with a hint of anger, my husband retorted with a tantrum. "You can just save it again. You're overreacting." At the moment, something inside me snapped. I couldn't bear to stay in that house any longer. I have forcibly pulled my son's hand, whom I had been talking to my in-laws with, and left the house. I couldn't stand the air in that house anymore. "What's wrong, Mom?" my son asked with a puzzled expression. I was desperately trying to hold back my tears, but even though we left the house, we had nowhere to go. My parents' house was far away, and even if we went back now, the train would stop halfway. Then my son asked me, "Are we going to Aunt Kate?" He asked me curiously. Aunt Kate was my husband's sister. In other words, my sister-in-law. If we went to her house, we could get there in less than an hour from here. Thinking that, I said to my son, "Yes, we are," and we headed straight to my sister-in-law's house. Despite coming unannounced, my sister-in-law warmly welcomed us. When I explained the situation to her, "For the time being, you can stay at our house until you settle down. I'm sorry," she said to me. Grateful for her words, my son and I ended up staying in my sister-in-law's house. The next day, when I woke up in the morning, my sister-in-law was already gone, and she didn't return until late afternoon. She looked extremely tired. "What happened, sister-in-law?" I asked her, and she replied, "I went to see my family. They turned out to be such foolish people. But don't worry, I made sure they signed a contract," she said, handing me a document with a smile on her face. On the paper, it was written that they would fully repay the money they had taken from my savings without permission. Kate, you went through all this trouble for me? I asked desperately, on the verge of tears. And my sister-in-law smiled and said, well, it's because my stupid family caused the trouble for Isabella. I can't find peace of mind unless I do something like this, she said to me. Thank you so much. I informed my sister-in-law, and the next day, I returned to my parents' house with my son. As soon as I arrived, I hired a lawyer and demanded a divorce from my husband. From my husband, I received messages filled with empty words like, please reconsider. I was in the wrong. But within me, there was no room for reconsidering the divorce anymore. I deleted all his contact information and instructed my lawyer to convey my intention of not withdrawing the divorce. Considering that he had used my savings without permission, my husband understood from the explanation of the lawyer that refusing the divorce further would work against him. After that, he readily accepted the divorce. Thanks to my sister-in-law's contract, the savings that had been used without permission were quickly reimbursed. According to the lawyer, my husband sold a newly purchased luxurious apartment and used the money to settle the payment to me. However, the savings he used without permission were merely a down payment, and the remaining loan for that apartment still exists even after its sale, serving as the debt of my in-laws. Of course, my husband faced the consequences as well, and I made sure to claim the educational expenses for our son until he comes of age. Now, it seems my ex-husband and my in-laws live together in a cramped, run-down apartment. With this, my revenge is perfectly complete. Now, I live happily with my son, receiving support from my parents and my childhood home. Of course, I regularly meet with my sister-in-law, and our relationship remains as good as ever. She herself insists on cutting ties completely with our family and has no involvement anymore. Next year, my sister-in-law and her husband are expecting a new addition to their family. Once the baby is born, we have promised to go out together with my son, making it a party of 5. By then, I aim to become an independent mother and one my son can be proud of. With that in mind, I cherish every day of my life.